Really happy to have Matrix Networks support us and sponsor us and be part of this event. We have an excellent panel, and this is obviously a topic that's top of mind for everybody out there. Work from home, how do you do it securely, how do you do it smartly? Well, we're going to get into all of that, and we're hopefully going to bring in some fresh topics that you haven't heard about along this conversation. So with that, why don't we go around and do some introductions? Chip, why don't we start with you?
Great. I'm Chip Gibbons with Thrive Networks. I'm the CISO here.
Derek Abbott, I'm the field CTO at Fortinet.
I'm Todd Hyde with Cisco. I'm a channel technical security architect.
So what's the single most important thing that you think any organization, any size, can do right now to adapt to cybersecurity in this new world of working from home? Chip, let's start with you.
Great. So the employees that are now working from home, this is obviously very new for a lot of them. And this is not, it hasn't been standard. Most people have been in the office. And getting people trained in security awareness training, what to look for, and to protect themselves from malicious emails or whatnot is extremely important nowadays. In the past, when you were behind your corporate firewall and you might have clicked a link, it might have stopped it. Now, a lot of those people are not behind corporate firewalls. They're behind their home routers or whatnot. And internal IT does not have the same ability to go and protect the end users that they used to, or they haven't up to this point. So training the end users is always a very good first step to get you to at least a basic level of security.
Excellent. Todd, what do you think? What do you think is one of the most important things organizations need to do to think about cybersecurity with work from home?
So if they're going to allow people to work from home on their own systems, BYOD, bringing your own device, is really a major concern. And then authentication of those people to the resources that you're giving, that they need to do their work from home job. Those are the two things. Having multi-factor authentication is a big bonus. And there's a lot of technology out there that can also do posture assessments with that multi-factor authentication client. So that makes it largely self-serve. So that's the two things that you could start with. Having the capacity is the next thing.
Todd, that's awesome. And in fact, you introduced a couple of topics we're going to definitely dig into more deeply. Derek, what do you see?
So I think approaching end users who are new, as has already been said, to a work from home kind of environment and giving them access to sort of scrubbed internet, to scrubbed connections is, I think, super important, because you're kind of allowing them to come in, finding the network as it is, without any ability to control it. And we've seen a number of smaller and medium-sized organizations who are opting for trying to create and deliver some some baseline level of overall connectivity security, which can be done at a relatively low cost, even for those without huge IT and security budgets. And that's like the super low bar to get over, which takes away a whole bunch of the threats that are potentially problematic for those folks. So it is I think a good first step, and certainly not the last step, but no matter what size you are, it's, I think, within people's budgets to go down that route.
Awesome. To round this out for our audience, what we're dealing with work from home and why we're talking about cybersecurity is, as many of you probably know, right? Everybody had to, or majority of the employees had to go from home. We had to keep productivity in place as business owners. And so we had to make sure that those employees were able to get into our systems. And so frankly, security took a back seat in order for availability and for productivity to take over. Now we have the chance to really take a step back, right size. Look, the new world order going forward looks to be that we'll probably have a big element of our staff working from home. So we have to make some assumptions. That work from home environment must be considered a hostile environment. And then to one of the things Todd brought up, that work from home environment may not even have a corporate owned asset. And so we have to be concerned about that asset accessing our corporate environment, as well as that user account and that credential accessing our environment. And the home users are constantly being targeted and highly vulnerable, highly susceptible to being compromised. So there's a big reason we're talking about this in the idea of work from home. So for you guys, what do you see around just endpoint security, and how do you even deal with this idea of organizations that absolutely have to allow employees to use their own devices? How do you secure those environments and keep the corporation safe?
I'll take that. So I know for Thrive, we work with a lot of clients, and most of our clients right now are working from home, and it was a big change for a lot of them. We are a big fan of Fortinet firewalls, and with the Forti client on each device, we can do a lot with that. We can do scans and see if those endpoints have vulnerabilities that we didn't know about to help protect those end users. Because since, as you mentioned before, Dom and also Todd, you don't have that environment, you don't control that environment, and sometimes some people might laugh, but we've seen people who connect directly to the internet, and so you have a Windows 10 machine directly on the internet, and that could be unfortunate for a corporate environment. The other thing that we also work a lot with is Cisco Umbrella, because you can then protect those endpoints and where they're going better than you ever had in the past. We see a lot more blurring of the lines of being in the office versus being outside the office. Clients are asking us to be as secure outside as they were in.
Awesome.
And
Chip and Todd, yeah, please jump in.
yeah, and Chip brought up a really good point that you basically need to deploy an agent to ensure that there is some level of risk posture met before you're going to allow clients to access resources, depending on the sensitivity of those resources. I know our VPN client with Cisco gives us the ability to manage the umbrella product that he just mentioned before and have policies then pushed down. Whether someone's on that VPN or off of it, you can at least manage and do that. We can also manage endpoint security solutions like our anti-malware protection through that client and make sure that files that are traversing those clients are safe as much as we can. So there's a lot of really good technology to leverage for the security of either bring your own devices or corporate devices that need to be kept up to date.
Excellent. And Derek, from Fortinet's perspective.
Yeah, so there's a couple of sort of market dynamics that I think are encapsulate the discussion to this point, and it's really the zero trust model. So a lot of what we've described is actually folds into this zero trust approach to delivering security and zero trust architecture, and then to do that in this dynamic world that we live in now with not only multi-cloud and the sort of proliferation of the enterprise before this whole remote access change, but now including that remote access change, was something that Gartner coined last year called Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE. So if you're approaching zero trust and you're doing it from delivered from the network from a cloud perspective, and you can fold those two things together, you start to hit on a lot of these issues that we've already talked about. You're creating a secure environment for that user to access applications all over, and you're creating that's distributed and implies the capacity that Todd mentioned earlier is available and doesn't rely on strained corporate resources from a VPN concentrator or a bandwidth connectivity perspective. And so a good friend and customer of ours from the old days is a CISO for a company in Chicago, and he said, I don't have remote access anymore, I just have access. And I have to treat everything like that. And that's a big step, because especially in the days post the beginning of the coronavirus set of issues that we had, that was a bridge that was pretty far. But he had started this zero trust and SASE kind of approach, and those things are enabling companies that have started to adopt those to deal with all these issues concurrently.
That's awesome, Derek. And in fact, I'm going to open it up to the whole panel to talk a little bit more about zero trust and what that means for our audience who may not know what the term means. But I want to remind the audience of what we started with and what Chip talked about and what all of us agree with here on the panel. What we just now have been talking about are technology solutions around the work from home environment, whether it is securing that network or that device or that user, right? How do we solve that technically? But what Chip talked about in the very beginning, all of us agree here, and we encourage you, right, in your entire employee base and your customer base, the most important thing you can do is continuous education. We have to assume that those end users are going to continually be targeted by spear phishing and all kinds of other sophisticated or non-sophisticated approaches to compromise that end user. And so our very first line of defense, the single most important line of defense that we can have, as Chip pointed out, is user training and education. So just want to encourage our audience out there, do not lose sight of that. It may sound simple, it may sound fundamental or routine or boring. It is the most important thing you can do, is to continually test and coach your teams. And we have solutions for that around how to not click on certain things in emails, how to actually handle email appropriately and all that kind of stuff. But just wanted to bring that back up. So let's get back to this idea of zero trust. And let's open up to anybody who wants to start it. If you want it, Derek, Todd, Chip, whomever. What does this idea of zero trust even mean? And are organizations starting to adopt it?
They're definitely starting to adopt it. It's a huge topic, and basically the concept is that you trust no one or nothing as being secure, and you must validate it before you're allowing them access to whatever resources you're going to control. So that's it at the highest level. I mean, Derek obviously is very well versed in it, as all of us are, is because it's a hot topic now, and it's security as a topic is about layers, and zero trust is increasing those layers to get additional security controls in place is really what it's about.
Yeah, and it even drives into the decision for access, things like policy, like state of the device. You can, if you know the state of the device and combine that with user and identity information and other geography and time of day info, you can start to create a picture about whether or not a service should be available to a user at a given time with a given device state based on risk profiles, et cetera. It can get extremely complex, or you can start out by dipping your toe in with something a little less complex than that whole suite of attributes that you're looking at. But it's very attribute based and can be driven by sort of risk profiles of both on the user side and on the service side. And yes, we're seeing substantial interest and adoption across the board right now.
Thanks,
one of the things that I've noticed is zero trust has been, it's been talked about and really pushed on enterprise level corporations, very large corporations. But now some of the smaller corporations, when maybe 10 years ago they had one firewall and that was good, now there's a whole idea change that we're going to do more, since everybody's not behind that firewall anymore. That firewall they just bought is really not doing as much as it used to in that satellite office, because nobody's sitting there anymore. So that zero trust is being brought up more and more often, and it's these mid-sized companies are really looking to drive that forward, and they're trying to take, as Derek and Todd mentioned, you can have a lot of little pieces that add up to have your layers of security that really help drive that zero trust and get your end users to be in a good place.
I love it. And for our audience out there, just to round all that out, this idea of zero trust, right? And in this conversation today, work from home. Zero trust is really, well, let's think of it this way. Today, the traditional VPN architecture, remote VPN, if you will, just simply means that a user has a credential, a username and password. Maybe they have multi-factor authentication, which is absolutely an important thing to have. But in any case, they have that credential and they get authenticated. And now they have basically full access to the entire network inside the environment, because they are now considered a trusted user because they were authenticated. Zero trust flips that model on its head and says we will never trust a user or a device accessing any resource. We will always authenticate and verify that that user is authorized to access these systems, resources, or networks. So a lot more to talk about there. It's a really big conversation. It is something organizations should shift towards, especially if they cannot get agents on those end devices in the network, in the home network, I should say. So a lot more we could talk about here. Let me change gears. Let's step back a little bit from all three of you guys. Love to hear your perspective. What do we see as new threats, new trends that you're seeing around risks that are being introduced to organizations from the work from home environments?
Yeah, I would talk about that one. One of the bigger, or at least most prevalent ones we are seeing now are actually kind of quick get rich type things for hackers. That being said, that's they send the previous marketing person, receptionist, whatnot, an email from the quote unquote CEO saying, please buy these gift cards for our employees to boost morale, or please do whatever it is to help somebody at home, to help these people, right? Because people's morale are low or whatnot. Since in the past, the person might walk down the hall to talk to the president or CEO and ask them, did you ask me to do this? It seems weird. Now they don't want to pick up the phone. They don't want the call. We had a conversation with a prospect the other day who had 4 employees running around to Walmart's buying gift cards, right? It's though people, you might laugh a little bit, it's people don't want to interrupt the CEO because, it's CEO, you don't want to interrupt them, but there has to be a better chain and a better way of training these people, as you mentioned earlier, Dom, that we need to train these people on what to look for, and if you get this, what to do. And, should you pick up the phone or send an email to the CEO, or do you just go out and do it, right? It's there needs to be some discussion and some process internally on what to do with these things.
And that's
Yeah, I know.
just the advancement of social engineering. Social engineering's always been the big weak link with the employee in the enterprise. And so, as he's described, in the new world, or our new world that we live in now, people adapted the social engineering techniques to exploit people's vulnerabilities here. And so that's the name of the game with social engineering. And you'll notice that this social engineering begins with email. Email is still and continues to be the #1 attack vector. And so you've got to put controls in place on email that can look at what the contents of email to help stop these types of attacks. There's very, very granular controls you can put around your email environment that people are relying on to help remove malicious URLs, malicious attachments, domain spoofing protection. All of these things are critical in this environment. And where you used to have those in place in a maybe say an Exchange server in a data center at the company, those are now Office 365 accounts in the cloud. And so you got to be able to adapt to that type of level of protection in order to stop those types of attacks. And again, it's extortion. That's the bottom line. They're trying to extort money quick and easily as they can, and ransomware is still a problem. Continues to be because it's quick and easy.
Yeah, and Derek, I know you've got some thoughts there. Real quickly for our audience, one of the things that Todd's pointing out again, and this is just a core theme that we have to have as a mindset for cybersecurity professionals and advisors to any of our businesses that we're working with, and even within layered security, right? Yes, it's an old topic. Yes, people have said it for many years, but it is no more relevant than it is today. Training is absolutely a first step. It's fundamentally important. I look at it as a way to make our frontline employees our Marine force, right? They are our early warning system. They can help our internal people know about, are we being targeted? Do we have something new to look at? But what Todd also pointed out is we talk about email environments. There are things you can do inside of email security. So there's a lot of other components we can get into, but the whole point is that there's just a lot to think about, and taking a step back and being smart about your approach to cybersecurity is what counts. So Derek, what are you seeing out there?
I mean, what the Bare Naked Ladies sang a song in the 90s called "It's All Been Done." I mean, that's kind of where we are. Like this is rehashing of a lot of the same stuff, but what's changed is the control points that you have between the insider that gets socially engineered and what they're accessing. So that is what really I think is changing, is how do you get the control points and the policy enforcement inspection function to live between the work from home environment and the cloud resources that the user is going to try to get to without going through, I think as Chip mentioned, this policy enforcement and security stack that you've invested in that lives in a data center or lives in at the edge of one of your your physical locations, like now there's a new architecture that we have to apply the same kind of controls within to handle the same kind of threats and issues, but to do so in this new environment that we live in. So it's, to me, it's a riff on the same kind of stuff. There's not, yes, they're taking advantage of, you know, in the wake of a hurricane, you see tons of phishing that is around donations to Red Cross, and in the wake of COVID and this work from home newness, you're going to see those rifts continue to hit whatever's hot and whatever's new. So I think the attack vectors haven't changed, but the places that we have to deploy the controls around those, you know, after the training part of it has dramatically changed.
And Derek, I'm going to stick with you because you absolutely just teased out something I want to talk about, which is blind spots that organizations have today. But you know, I want to get passionate on my soapbox for just a quick 30 seconds, and this is where, you know, what Derek is bringing out, what we're all talking about here, cybersecurity, just like business, right? Strategy. A lot of people use that word when they're really talking about tactics, and I'm a former military guy, so the word is important to me. So when we're talking about strategy, it's exactly what Derek is saying. You know, let's just take a step back. Let's just understand that this is something we've seen before. We essentially need to, frankly, put on our big boy pants and be serious about accepting the reality of these new world cybersecurity threats. And we need to put together a strategy that defines these different areas that we need to focus on within our organization to develop and deliver those layered security components that we need. So Derek, what do you see in terms of blind spots now with all this work from home, you know, just basically loose perimeter story that we're hearing all over the place? What do you see as like key blind spots that are hitting organizations right now?
Well, you know, for those who have adopted cloud, which is almost everybody now, whether they realize it or not, they're cloud consumers. I think, you know, I think the access to those cloud resources via work from home, if it hasn't been thought through, is, you know, direct through the internet, and that opens up some significant issues. So I think that's sort of number one, is how do you wedge in a policy enforcement inspection function to a work from home user who is accessing cloud-based resources, which is the majority of the resources that they're going to hit, unless you're you know, in very specified industries nowadays, where you have internal systems and servers that people are working on, you know, on a day-to-day basis. So I think that the cloud adoption plus work from home creates, as I mentioned in the SASE, Gartner's Secure Access Service Edge, the number of edges, especially if you include the remote access users in that, the number of edges that an enterprise has to consider now, and to try to create a policy enforcement inspection function between all of those edges has exploded, you know, practically exponentially for the past few years, and certainly for the past 6 months. So I think cloud plus remote users equals rethinking of architecture, rethinking of strategy to deal with those the same historical threat vectors and threat actors that we've been dealing with before.
Awesome. Chip, I want to come to you, and Todd, I'll come back to you. I will end it with you because I know that you guys have just massive visibility across the globe with all kinds of threats and stuff, and probably some great advice. But Chip, I know that you're in the day-to-day fighting with customers. I know you have a consulting practice that you can help customers, because this sounds complicated, right? It sounds like there's a lot to do. Where do we even start? I know you help companies with that, but what have you seen as some key blind spots that they've just overlooked?
There's a couple of areas. One, there's technical, as Todd mentioned earlier today. You know, multi-factor authentication is an area where people just don't, you know, if they haven't already started doing it, they really need to look at it. And a lot of companies are still putting their head in the sand thinking a username and password is good enough. And then the next area where we start seeing a single sign-on, because you have, as Derek mentioned, you have all these cloud applications all over different places, and people are using different passwords, and some of them are multi-factor and some of them are not. And it's, if one person leaves a company and did we turn off their access over here? That is one part of it. But then the other part that we don't see people actually keeping up with is policies and procedures. Because, well, nobody likes to talk policies and procedures because it's boring, and it's, you know, it's not really what the management of the company wants to do, that's what kind of drives security. If within the policies and procedures, we say you need to use VPNs, you need to use multi-factor, you need to use certain things, that helps drive the company in a direction that in the past it might not driven it before. So there's kind of two areas where I start seeing the holes, and one of them is technical, and the other one is more looking at the long range. Where do we need to go, and what do we put in place in our documents that help us get us there?
Awesome. Todd, I'll let you bring us home. Chip, I'm going to just amplify that real quickly, and this is just the core theme. Good cybersecurity, layers, policies are just another layer. And we all on this call have seen several organizations that have had great policies that have collected a lot of dust and they get breached.
Yeah.
So policies mean nothing unless they're actually relevant and put in place and into practice. Todd, Cisco, awesome world visibility. What do you see just across the base if you could generalize some key blind spots that customers need to think about?
Well, the challenge that most organizations face is the fact that they don't have enough expertise in-house to deal with all these layers. That's always been the biggest problem is there's millions of cybersecurity jobs that are unfilled out there because there's not enough people to meet the demand for them. And then people think the solutions are to buy another box or software solution to address something, and these just tend to multiply. And then there's no uniformity in how they're used and the policies that are being pushed to them. So we have a pretty big initiative to try to help centralize that and simplify it so that it's more effective, because what happens with these orgs is the noise gets so loud that they learn how to accept that high noise floor and they don't know what's bad from the noise. Having products that have common APIs, that's what we've put a lot of eggs in the basket in at Cisco. We've got a new security portal that's included with any of our products, so we're not even charging for this portal, that aggregates a lot of that API data. And the point of that is to help make this simple, quick, and more effective for these companies because they don't have the expertise to manage the complexity. You heard us talk about zero trust and all the layers there, multi-factor, endpoint, email, moving into the network, the cloud. Listen to the list of things that people have to manage. This is not simple, and so we've got to simplify it to make it more effective is what we've got going on. And we also have some incredible threat research that we've invested in a company called Talos, which is a nearly 400 professionals that do nothing but look into threats. And because of the surface of our platforms, we see a lot of information and feed that back into it in near real time. So that's what we've got going on.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm just going to give a couple of props here, both to Fortinet and to Cisco. So Fortinet, when I worked at a large organization in the past, you guys can look me up who I'm talking about. Fortinet was part of our core fabric infrastructure. We're providing services to our customers, but we had a great partnership with Cisco Talos, where we were feeding them all of our global visibility data, and they were able to use that as just another point to look at what's going on across the globe. Chip, let's get into it real quickly. You've seen, you have all kinds of customers, whether it's, very simple, not simple, but patch management, vulnerability management, or whether it's complex managed security infrastructure. So in this idea that Todd is bringing up, should customers leverage service providers to help them do things more smartly and more effectively, or are they better off trying to do it on their own and stitching a bunch of these different tools together? Where is that sweet spot for organizations? What kind of guidance might you give them?
Right. That's a very interesting point, because Thrive and a lot of service providers out there are really working hard to help augment IT staff. So in the past, we used to go into a company and the IT staff would be not enthusiastic to see us, right? Because they thought we might be taking their jobs. Nowadays, that's not the case, because we might take on patching, which is, nobody likes to do, and it's a miserable experience, and Thrive does it all day, every day. Well, again, as Todd mentioned, getting all these desperate systems talking to one, maybe, well, I don't like this term, single pane of glass, really can help out. But again, you can't just hire one SOC person. You can't hire one analyst, because if you do that, then you have blind spots from, you know, the time the person leaves at night to the time they get in the morning and all weekend long. And so you need to hire a bunch of people, and that's where a managed SOC really shines, because you can have a person who might have some security knowledge or not that handles some of the high level alerts internally, but then you have tier 1 and tier 2 at a provider that can really help out and take that noise and tune it down to something that's manageable, and allow your then on-site staff to deal with those types of situations, and really get you into a position to, instead of chasing and feeling like you're always behind the 8 ball, to actually getting ahead and doing the initiatives that we spoke about a few minutes ago.
There's a lot to unpack there. So I just for a very quick moment, and Derek, I'm going to come to you with my next question here, but I love to wax a little philosophy, and I actually want to call Chip out on a little bit of a Freudian slip he made there that the audience may have heard of. He talked about, you know, all these desperate systems out there, and he meant disparate. And
Yeah,
I would say
sorry.
desperate is actually the right word, because they're, you know, these companies have deployed so many different pieces of technology to solve these point solutions because some vendor came in and told them that's what they needed, just like Todd was saying. When in fact, they are now in this state of desperation because these systems aren't talking to each other, and there is no coordinated exercise or orchestration across the enterprise to really understand, where do we focus our time? Where is a threat that we need to actually go and look at? To Todd's point, how do we cut that signal or increase that signal to noise ratio, right? And cut that noise floor down. Very tough problem to solve for. Look, I used to be an enterprise customer. I used to advise or report to a CSO and advise on, you know, big technology solutions that we might buy. And if I were in the marketplace today, that's exactly what I would be doing is, look, I know I've got a limited amount of security staff. Maybe I don't have any dedicated security staff. So I know that there is no way, even if I have 1 or 2 or 3 good security folks on my team, there is no way they can do the full breadth of all I need done in this idea of good layered security. So why would I not leverage a mature service provider that has the right people, processes, and technology, and outsource certain functions and hold that service provider accountable for patching, for infrastructure management, for threat correlation, and then my team simply consumes the information and helps make decisions and inform my management about what to do. That's what I would be doing. So Derek, I'm going to pitch it over to you. So if you were an enterprise organization, you were a leader inside of a company, a cybersecurity practice, and in this new world of work from home and all the craziness that we've got going on, now you've got new budget, the dust has settled a little bit. Where would you start? How would you prioritize your approach? Let's even say you're new to the company, you've joined it for 2 or 3 months, and now you're charged with cybersecurity. Go figure it out.
Well, you know, a lot of times the problem is the solution. So if we call out cloud as being one of the things that we have to embrace as far as you know, where workloads and functions and objects sit within the organization, then maybe cloud's the way that we deliver security, and maybe that's the answer. So you know, I would probably start to take a pulse of service providers, MSSP types, who can deliver get me out of the game of you know, worrying about, as we've established, fielding and deploying and maintaining and upgrading systems, and get me into an output-based consumption model that lets me get outcomes instead of run projects. Because I want to buy an outcome. I don't want to pay for and have to field and staff a project. And that can be done through an MSSP, which is you know, as Chip was saying, that's kind of that's table stakes. But nowadays, because you have this substantial reliance on cloud, maybe there are cloud security providers, cloud providers who deliver security outcomes from a cloud perspective that allow you to be agile in a multi-cloud world and be agile in a remote workforce heavy type of use case, and go find those things and leverage those and get me to a place where I am worried about the outcomes and the problems, rather than the infrastructure and the underlying you know, ones and zeros running through my systems that I'm deploying and maintaining.
I love it, Derek. Todd, what are your thoughts? I think we got you on mute, Todd.
Yeah, you're off.
Unmuted now. Sorry, had some noise in the background, didn't want the world to hear. I have to agree with what he says on this, because the users, as much education as you give them, it's not going to ever be enough to stop the problems. That's only part of the issue. You've got to put technology in place. You've got to do risk assessments. You've got to know, you've got to get down to a granular level of role-based access in order to protect things based on the risk of those assets that you have to secure. And so it's all about using resources wisely. And if you can put technology in place behind the scenes that does a lot of the work that you relied on people to do previously, then you're going to be further ahead for sure. And on the single pane of glass concept that we introduced earlier, that's never going to be the happen. But being able to aggregate data and then pivot to where it needs to is going to help you with the speed at which you can defend when you do find things.
Awesome. And Chip, I'm going to let you bring it home here, but as I always do, I get a little bit of the soapbox. Look, for our audience, the beauty of being on this, hearing this panel is you get 4 different perspectives, different ways that we look at the world and see the world. From my perspective, and this is what I would coach all of you to do, whether you are within your customer, whether you are within your enterprise, or whether you are working with other enterprises or talking to your peers. Look, money well spent, in my mind, if I were hired, the thing that I would do is I would pay for a risk assessment. If there is not a living, breathing risk assessment program or risk management program in place today, that's the very first thing I would do. I would take a look at understanding our critical assets and then applying the right mitigation or coming up with a strategy to apply the right mitigation controls. My whole point is, when I would come into an enterprise, I need to get a lay of the land. I need to understand what exists today, what's critical, how are we protecting it, how effectively are we doing that, how are we detecting anything happening inside our environment, how effective are we at that. So my risk assessment is going to help me understand at a high level what that looks like, and then from there I'm going to drive into defining budget for critical activities. So that would be my thought. Chip, I know that you guys deal with customers in all different verticals, all different sizes. So if you were coaching any customers in this new day and age, right, the dust has settled, work from home looks to be a fairly new reality, big loose perimeter, how would you help them figure out where do they start?
That's a good point. So what we do go into a lot of customers, and it's interesting. So if let's say you are a new IT person at a company, the first thing you're going to do is try to find everything so you know where it all is, right? We do get a lot of calls from customers that already they've been there for many years, but then they hit sprawl, right? You have stuff that is going everywhere and they don't know where it is. They bring us in, we review everything, and we try to find where all these different systems are, whether they be in the cloud, whether they are on site with Active Directory, and then also to take a look and do a good health assessment to find out what are the policies. Do you have a character limit on your passwords or not? Are you doing anything with the stuff that you have? And knowing where it is and knowing what you're currently using, and then you can take that budget that Todd mentioned before. You only have a limited amount of money, so you want to spend it wisely. And if you know where your most critical assets are, then you can actually take that money and use it to protect those assets. We go into a lot of clients now where they don't even know what the critical assets are. Or they say, oh, my most critical asset is X, when in reality, after we talk to them, it's really Y. And we really should focus the money on Y. So I fully agree with what all of you said on the call here today, and taking that money and using it very wisely and understanding where to put it is critical these days.
Thanks, Chip. So in the last few minutes here, I saved the hardest one for last. So I'm going to use some brain power here from you guys. We run into this all the time, and it's never an easy solution. But this idea in work from home with the non-corporate assets that are being used to access corporate assets, how do you apply good security on those devices that you as a corporation don't own, don't have administrative rights on, and might frankly have resistance from the employees who don't want to install software on their home device, but yet they need to do work? not an easy problem to solve for. And we haven't even gotten into data protection, right? Can they pull data down and do all that kind of stuff? So at a high level, in fact, Todd, let's start with you, right? How do you handle or even give any guidance to customers around that sort of work from home environment where they are not, where the enterprise is not able to install agents on anything inside the remote workers environment?
If they're going to get paid, they're going to have to comply to a policy. That's I hate to get that terse about it, but there's going to have to be some give there in order to remain an employee. I mean, honestly, that's based, again, this ties back to the risk element that you brought up. And some people, I mean, if they're not willing to comply, then that means they got to look for a different occupation at a different company. I mean, it's hard to say. Having 100% web-based access with some pretty good authentication controls on it is a way to go about that. It's kind of tough. I mean, honestly, if you're trying to be secure, then there's going to be some controls that are going to have to be put in place in order to do that. And it's getting a lot better with things like multi-factor authentication. I bring that up again because it can tie into a lot of necessary access for applications that a lot of people would need that help reduce this overarching, I got to have an agent and I'm only going to allow you to connect via VPN type situations. So it's definitely unique for the organization, but there are strategies to approach it that are not as obtrusive as what you've seen. I'll let Chip weigh in on that because I'm sure he probably gets that question a lot.
Yeah, well, I do get that question a lot, and actually, it's not as bad as you make it out to be for most of our clients, because most of our clients up to this point have their end users. Most of them, a majority of them, have laptops because people have already been on a snow day or whatnot. There always has been a little bit of, okay, you might work from home this day or that day, and so that mobile workforce has not been surprising. What is surprising is the amount of data that people start, moving around. That's where before, when I mentioned policies, it can be very nice for a company to say, when you work from home, use a corporate laptop. You don't use your son's Dell that you might have on the side, or you don't use that whatever machine because you have the 42-inch wacky monitor. You can use the laptop we've given you, and you can hook other things up to it, maybe depending on your policy, right?
That's policy.
That really helps because you can point to that, and the companies can point to that and say, working from home, you do X, and it really, really helps out. The other side, though, is the mobile devices, the phones that people carry around with them that everybody has email on. That again, if you set it up correctly, and in the beginning you have it in your policy, if you want email on your phone, you, let's say, might have Intune, or you might have a remote wipe but only for the email, or something that doesn't take over the phone, doesn't allow the employer to see other things on the phone, but does let them protect the data that they have on your phone. So there is a balance that every company must tread and figure out how to do it, but it definitely can be done.
Cool. Yeah, and this is and Derek, we'll let you close it out here, but this is where I was also thinking. Again, hopefully, if there's anything our audience has taken away from, is that this idea of layered security is it is an old topic, but it doesn't mean it's irrelevant. It is more relevant than ever. And so what you're hopefully picking up on is that there's a lot of different points that need to be put in place and to have a good security program. And that's layered security, right? Just like an onion. Look, I want to thank Thrive, Fortinet, and Cisco for being on this panel today. It's super helpful, super informative. I hope the audience found it useful. I hope that at least, you found some new nuggets that you hadn't heard about. And most importantly, I hope that what you picked up on is that through Matrix Networks, what you're getting is the ability to have independent advice, to understand what makes the most sense, and to focus on the business first in order to put in the right cybersecurity solutions. So with that, I'll close out the panel. Thank you everybody for your time today. Sincerely appreciate it, and I hope everyone out there has a great rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.